The years I gave everything. You don't really know what betrayal feels like. Until the person you sacrificed everything for looks at you and acts like you're a stranger. My name is Rachel Bennett, and for most of my life, I believed family meant loyalty, even when it cost you everything. I learned that lesson the hard way. Because when my younger brother Eli walked across the graduation stage in his designer suit and smiled for the cameras, I was there in the crowd, cheering louder than anyone. What I didn't know then was that it would be the last time he'd ever acknowledge me in public. Growing up, it was always just the two of us and Mom. Dad left early, a ghost with a wedding ring and excuses. I was 13 when he walked out, and Eli was 8. That day, I promised myself I'd never let my brother feel abandoned again. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I got my first job at 16, waitressing at a small diner after school, coming home smelling like grease and coffee, stuffing tips into a jar labeled Eli's College Fund. Back then, that jar felt like hope. Eli was smart, brilliant, even. He could look at a computer once and figure out how it worked. I used to joke that he'd end up building robots or hacking NASA someday. He'd laugh and say, "Only if you're my CFO, Ratch." I didn't realize how much those words meant to me until later, when they stopped. After high school, I gave up my own college acceptance to stay home and work full-time. Mom's health had started declining, and the bills piled up faster than the checks could clear. Eli got into Stanford on partial scholarship. The rest? That was me. I took a second job, night shifts at a logistics warehouse, barely sleeping, saving every penny for tuition payments and textbooks. There were months I ate instant noodles so Eli could afford dorm fees. But I didn't mind. He was going to make it. We were both going to make it. I didn't see it as sacrifice back then. I saw it as love, the kind that doesn't ask for credit, just a chance. Eli called me almost every week that first year, updates about classes, professors, the crazy workload. He'd end every call with, "I couldn't do this without you, Ratch." Those words fueled me. They made the exhaustion worth it. Then, little by little, the calls stopped coming. By his junior year, our conversations were down to short texts. He got internships in Silicon Valley, rubbed shoulders with venture capitalists, started attending networking events. Whenever I asked about his life, he'd say, "Busy, Ratch. You know how it is." When I hinted at visiting him, he'd hesitate. "Oh, it's not a great time right now. Maybe next semester." Next semester never came. I told myself it was just distance, that he was focused, ambitious. But deep down, I felt it. The growing silence. The shift in tone whenever I reminded him of where we came from. He'd laugh it off, say, "You're too sentimental. That's why you'd never survive in this world." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. By the time Eli graduated, he already had a startup offer and investors lined up. He invited Mom to the ceremony, but not me. She was too sick to travel, so I went in her place. When he saw me after the ceremony, his smile froze, like he hadn't expected me to show up. "Ratch," he said, adjusting his tie. "You made it." "Of course," I said softly. I wouldn't miss it for the world. But the way he looked around nervously, like he was afraid someone might see me, that told me everything. He introduced me to his friends as Rachel, a family friend. Not his sister. Not the person who paid his tuition. Just a family friend. There are moments that break you quietly. No shouting. No betrayal speech. Just the sound of someone erasing you with a smile. I left early that day. Watched the rest of his photos from a distance, his new suit, his new friends, the life I thought I'd helped him build. That night, I cried harder than I had since Dad left. Because somehow, this hurt worse. Mom passed away a year later. Eli didn't make it to the funeral. He sent flowers, expensive ones. No note. The obituary listed Rachel Bennett, surviving daughter. It could have said only daughter. Because in every way that mattered, I was. In the years that followed, I tried to move on. I opened a small accounting firm. Worked late nights, built clients from scratch. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Sometimes I'd see Eli's name in tech magazines or social media, Forbes, under 30 lists, flashy interviews, luxury offices. Each headline cut like glass. Not because I was jealous, but because I'd been erased from the story I'd helped write. If you've ever built someone's dreams while they forgot your name, subscribe. Because this isn't a story about bitterness. It's about reclaiming the credit and the peace. Then, one morning, I got a message that would change everything. From Eli. Hey, Ratch. Long time. Need a favor. Can we talk? After 6 years of silence, he needed something again. And this time, I wasn't the same girl who'd sacrifice everything. He forgot me when he had everything. But when the cracks appeared in his perfect empire, I was the only one who could save him. When his world began to fall apart. When someone uses you as a stepping stone to reach their dreams, they always forget one thing. Stones crack when you step on them too hard. And when they break, there's no going back. 6 years. That's how long it had been since my brother last spoke to me. 6 years of silence, success, and stories where I didn't exist. Then suddenly, one Tuesday morning, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in forever. Eli Bennett. The message was short. Hey, Ratch. Long time. Need a favor. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was anger, the sharp kind that feels like old wounds reopening. But beneath that was curiosity. Because people like Eli didn't reach out unless they were desperate. So, I replied. Depends. What kind of favor? He responded within seconds. Can I call you? Please. I hesitated before picking up, but when I finally did, the voice on the other end didn't sound like the brother I remembered. He sounded tired. Ratch, he said, almost whispering, I know I don't deserve your time, but I'm in trouble. 100 responses burned on my tongue. You think, where were you when I buried Mom? Do you even remember what I sound like? But I swallowed them. What kind of trouble? I asked flatly. My company, he said. We're being audited. Investors are pulling out. I can't fix the numbers. It took me a moment to process. You mean you cooked the books? No, he said quickly. Not exactly. We just, look, things got messy. Our CFO quit last week. You're the best financial mind I know. I almost laughed. The irony of it all, the brother who once called me too small town now wanted my help saving his multi-million-dollar company. Life has a strange sense of justice. Sometimes the people who erased you from their story end up needing you to finish their sentence. He offered to fly me out to San Francisco. All expenses paid. Just like old times, except now he wasn't asking for tuition money, he was asking for a lifeline. I agreed to meet him, but not out of kindness. I wanted closure. I wanted to see, with my own eyes, what kind of man my brother had become. The next day, I stepped off the plane into a city that hummed with money. Sleek buildings, silent cars, people who moved like they were late for their own futures. His assistant picked me up in a black Tesla and drove me to the office, a glass tower with his name engraved on the lobby wall. Bennett Innovations. For a moment, I felt a pang of pride. He'd built an empire. And then I remembered, so had I, quietly, without applause. He was waiting in the conference room when I arrived. Same charming smile, same expensive suit, but there was a new line on his face, one that hadn't been there before. Guilt, maybe. Rachel, he said, standing. You look great. Save the small talk, I said, setting my bag down. Show me the problem. He hesitated, then pulled up the reports. The numbers didn't lie. The company was bleeding cash, hidden under creative accounting and inflated revenue projections. "This isn't a few mistakes, Eli," I said. "This is fraud." "I know," he whispered. "And if it goes public, we lose everything. The investors, the staff, the reputation. Please, Ratch, I need your help to fix it, to make it right." The old me, the girl who once gave up her education for his, would have jumped in without question. But that girl was gone. "Why me?" I asked. "You could hire anyone. You know people in Silicon Valley who'd line up for this." He exhaled. "Because I trust you. You're the only one who won't sell me out." I laughed bitterly. "You didn't even claim me as your sister, remember? You told people I was a family friend." He closed his eyes. "I know. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life. Apologies don't erase history. But sometimes, hearing one, even late, feels like a door cracking open after years of silence." I agreed to help him. Not because I forgave him, but because I wanted the truth. For 3 weeks, I combed through spreadsheets, emails, and contracts. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. His CFO hadn't been the problem. Eli had been. He'd gotten reckless, too many shortcuts, too much pride. When I finally confronted him, he didn't deny it. "I thought I was untouchable," he said. "That's what they all told me. That I was a genius. And I believed it." "Genius doesn't mean good," I said quietly. He looked at me for a long moment and said something that caught me off guard. "You sound like Mom." For the first time in years, my throat tightened. I hadn't realized how much I missed hearing her name spoken aloud. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the hotel lobby staring at the city skyline, wondering when family love had become so conditional. I had done everything for him once, loved him, supported him, protected him. And when he no longer needed me, he'd cut me out like I was never there. Now that he needed saving again, I was supposed to forget all that? If you've ever been someone's safety net until they decided to fly alone, hit subscribe. Because this isn't about revenge. It's about learning when to stop catching people who never look back. By the end of the month, I had all the data I needed, and a choice to make. I could fix it quietly, clean the books, and help him survive the audit. Or I could report it, let the company collapse, and watch him learn the lesson he'd spent years avoiding. I called him to the office one evening. He walked in, looking hopeful. "Please tell me you found a way out." "I did," I said slowly. "But you're not going to like it." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I'm not covering it up, Eli. You need to come clean. To your investors. To your board. I'll help you restructure, but not lie." His jaw clenched. "You're kidding. You'd let me lose everything?" I met his gaze. "You already lost what mattered most, your integrity. And me." He slammed his hand on the desk. "You wouldn't even have that firm of yours if it weren't for me." I stood, calm but unshaken. "No, Eli. You wouldn't have had Stanford if it weren't for me." The silence after that was the sound of truth hitting harder than any argument could. For years, I thought loving my brother meant saving him. But that night, I learned the truth. Sometimes love means letting people fall so they can finally stand on their own. The fall and the reckoning. People think the hardest part of letting someone fall is watching them hit the ground. But the real pain? It's realizing you can't save them without breaking yourself all over again. Eli didn't take my refusal well. He stormed out of that glass conference room, slamming the door so hard the lights flickered. But I didn't chase him. I just sat there, calm, steady, exhausted, knowing this time, I'd done the right thing. The next morning, the office was buzzing. Word had spread that the auditors had found discrepancies, and investors were pulling emergency meetings. Within hours, the news broke. Bennett Innovations under investigation for financial misconduct. His empire, the one built on charm, risk, and pride, began to crumble. The world watched as the golden boy of Silicon Valley fell from grace. His face, once on magazine covers, was now plastered across news sites with headlines that used words like deception and collapse. I stayed silent. I didn't defend him. I didn't gloat. I just watched the truth catch up with him, finally. He called once that week, just once. I didn't answer. Not out of spite. But because sometimes silence is the only response left when words have lost their weight. For years, I thought loyalty meant standing in someone's shadow, waiting for them to notice your light. But real loyalty, the kind that heals, starts with being loyal to yourself. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at my office. No sender name, but I knew the handwriting instantly. It was Eli. Ratch. You were right. About everything. The numbers, the lies, the way I lived. I thought success could erase where we came from. I thought pretending made me powerful. But it only made me hollow. The board removed me. The company's gone. The lawyers say I might avoid charges if I cooperate. It's strange, I spent my life running from consequences, and now that I'm facing them, it feels honest. I'm sorry. Not for losing, but for losing you. I read it 3 times. And then I cried, not the angry kind, not the betrayed kind. It was the quiet release of years of buried grief finally surfacing. Because this wasn't about money or recognition anymore. It was about finally hearing the one thing I'd needed all along, truth. A month later, I saw him again. Not in a boardroom this time, but in a small diner, the same kind of place where I'd once worked to pay his tuition. He looked different, tired, yes, but lighter somehow. When he saw me, he stood up immediately. Ratch. I nodded, sitting down across from him. Neither of us spoke for a minute. Then he said, quietly, "You look good." I smiled faintly. "You don't." He laughed, a real laugh this time, not one meant to impress anyone. "Fair enough." He told me about the settlement. He'd sold most of his assets, paid off what he could, and moved back into a modest apartment. He was doing consulting work now, small projects, no spotlight. "I don't deserve anything big," he said. "Not yet." I stirred my coffee and said softly, "Deserve doesn't always mean perfect. It means honest." He nodded. "I wish I'd understood that before I lost everything." "You didn't lose everything," I said. "You just lost what?" Sometimes the people who hurt us don't need to be punished, they need to wake up. And if they're lucky, life does the waking for them. We talked for hours, about Mom, about the past, about how guilt and ambition can sound the same when you're young. He didn't try to justify anything. He didn't ask me to fix it. He just owned it. That, more than any apology, mattered. Before we left, he handed me an envelope. I frowned. "What's this?" Something I should have done a long time ago. Inside was a check, not for show, not for power. It was for every dollar I'd ever spent on his tuition, adjusted for inflation. I stared at it, stunned. "Eli, I don't want this." "It's not about want," he said quietly. "It's about balance. You helped me get here, even if I fell off the edge. I need to make it right." I looked at him, the boy who used to dream big, the man who lost himself chasing that dream, the brother who finally found humility at rock bottom. "I don't need money," I said. What I needed was my brother back. He smiled sadly. "Then I hope I can be that again. Someday." If you've ever given everything to someone who forgot your name, subscribe. Because sometimes the universe writes justice in its own time. And peace comes when you stop demanding repayment. When I left that diner, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something better. Free. For years, I'd carried the guilt of giving too much, believing love meant losing myself. Now I understood that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. Eli was finally learning that, too. Weeks passed. He sent small updates, a new job interview, a volunteer program he'd joined, a few lines about rebuilding his relationship with honesty. And though I didn't always respond, I smiled every time. Because sometimes forgiveness doesn't need words, just the quiet acceptance that people can change when they finally stop pretending. He built his success on my sacrifices, and then forgot my name. But life remembered. And when it brought him back to me, it wasn't for revenge. It was for redemption. The balance I chose. Rebuilding your life after someone erases you is not dramatic. It's daily. Quiet. Patient. It's choosing your dignity every single morning until it becomes your habit. When the dust settled on Eli's downfall, my life didn't become a highlight reel of triumph. It became work, meaningful, ordinary, and mine. I went back to the accounting firm, to clients who trusted me because I returned invoices on time and explained tax law without jargon. I taught, I mentored, and slowly a different kind of pride took root, the steady kind, not the glittering sort that fills headlines. One morning, a young woman walked into my office, nervous, clutching a scholarship application folder. She'd heard about the small mentorship fund I'd started, not from press but because a friend of a client had mentioned it. She wasn't the sort of person who expected a handout, she was the kind who'd worked 3 jobs to pay for a single textbook. When she left with the award letter, her eyes were bright in a way that reminded me of that old hope jar I used to fill. I realized then what I wanted to build, not a legacy plastered across magazines, but a quiet ladder for people who needed the step I hadn't had to climb alone. Eli's name in Forbes meant little to me now. This, someone standing taller because I'd given them space to grow, mattered. If you believe healing should be practical, not performative, subscribe. These are stories for people who choose themselves, every day. Eli and I kept a cautious line of contact. He sent updates, courses he was taking, the nonprofit he'd started doing pro bono consulting for, the small clients he was rebuilding from scratch. He didn't ask for dinner at my house, he didn't show up with grand gestures. Instead, he asked for a meeting to talk about an accountability framework he was designing for startups, a policy manual that would prevent the shortcuts he'd taken. He wanted my input. I said yes, but I set terms. We'd meet only in public spaces. Conversations would be professional, or they would be about family logistics, not invitations for old patterns to resurface. He agreed. He'd had to learn respect the long way, through missing opportunities, through honest reflection, through nights of reckoning. One afternoon, after a workshop where I'd taught a session on financial ethics for small business owners, Eli caught me in the hallway. He handed me a small, unassuming envelope. "I don't expect anything," he said. "But I want you to have this." Inside, there was a printed copy of the first draft of the policy manual he'd been working on, with my name on the acknowledgements page, not as a perfunctory nod but as credit, "To Rachel, for the years you saved the family." The line made me ache and then, unexpectedly, laugh. The man who once introduced me as a family friend, now used words that named me true. "I won't let you rehab my life with pretty words," I said, half joking. "But thank you for trying." He smiled, and for the first time in a very long time, that smile didn't carry the old hunger for applause. It carried humility. There were moments of temptation, small chances to step into what the world would call grand revenge or grand generosity. A headline outing that would expose every awkward detail of his past. An offer to take a board seat in a company that had once snubbed me, just so I could say I'd won. I turned both down. My life had gained value when I stopped performing for others. Public victory would have been a trap, loud, brief, and empty. Quiet integrity was more sustaining. So instead of spectacle, I chose structure. I formalized my mentorship fund into a registered charity. I began offering pro bono consultations to family-owned startups run by women, people who'd never been invited to the table. Building that was slow and bureaucratic and profoundly satisfying. I celebrated the small steps, the first legal filing, the first fundraiser where we raised enough to sponsor a full scholarship, the first thank you letter from a student who told me she'd taken a job she loved because she finally believed she could. Power that heals isn't made to be wielded. It's made to be shared. One Sunday afternoon, Eli called and asked if I would join him at the community center where he'd been volunteering. He wanted me there while he presented his accountability framework to local entrepreneurs. I agreed. He spoke, and I listened. He didn't make grand pronouncements. He spoke about choices, about how easy it is to confuse momentum for progress. He talked about the people who'd helped him, names were given honestly, and when he mentioned me, he described my help as steady and non-theatrical, exactly what it had been. After the meeting, a woman approached me. "Your brother really listened," she said. "I'm impressed. It's clear this is stirring change." I smiled. "It is," I said. "And it's about time." Eli found me then, cheeks flushed from the room's heat. He hugged me, tentative, not longing. "Thank you for coming," he said. "And for everything before all this started." "You earned your keep," I replied. "Now earn your life." He laughed, a small, honest sound. "I will." There are still family dinners where the old conversation sparks up, the same jokes, the same rhythms. Sometimes I participate. Other times I listen from the edge and let the tide pass. My boundaries remain in place not as punishment but as protection. I do not accept being erased for the sake of someone else's image. I will not be a footnote in my own life. And my healing, when I look back on it, is not the story of a single winning moment. It's a ledger of choices, the mornings I chose rest instead of apology, the nights I chose to work instead of mend someone's ego, the times I said no and watched the world not end. If you're rebuilding after being forgotten, subscribe. These stories honor the slow work of getting your life back. If you ask me now whether I regret the years I gave to Eli, my answer is complicated but honest, not entirely. I would do some things differently. I would have set boundaries sooner. I would have taught him the value of earning trust rather than assuming it. But I don't regret loving him. I regret allowing love to silence my own needs. He lost his empire. He found humility. I didn't set out to be a savior, I set out to be myself. Watching him come back, small, functional, accountable, was not revenge. It was grace. Not for him, but for me. Sometimes the people who hurt us are the very ones who show us, eventually, how to stop tolerating harm. And sometimes saving someone means standing still and letting them face the lesson they refuse to learn in comfort. I chose to be there for him after the fall, on my terms, with my dignity intact. When the new scholarship class sent photos of the first student supported by our fund, smiling in a cap too big for her head, I sat at my desk and cried. This time the tears were for a life that would be different because someone had chosen, finally, to share what they had learned. In the end, the story wasn't about what he took or what he pretended. It was about what I built in the space that betrayal had once left empty. And that, ultimately, no one could pretend away.